Prime Day es el 16 y 17 de julio. Con las ofertas épicas exclusivas para miembros Prime, recibe el reconocimiento que tanto mereces.
¡Wow! Gracias. Ni siquiera preparé un discurso. Quisiera agradecer a mi familia, que siempre necesita cosas. También a Sam, mi repartidor, por entregarme todas mis ofertas increíbles tan rápido. ¡Te adoro, Sam! ¡Mua!
Compra ofertas en electrónicos, hogar y más este Prime Day, del 16 al 17 de julio.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Granger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgranger.com or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to Heard Tell. Let's talk some economics. Every time we talk economics, we go get an actual economist. What a concept, huh? And this here be one of those certified bona fide economists. Fellas, he works for a government agency, but these are his and his alone opinions. We love having him on. He's one of our favorites. And because I know it annoys him greatly, I will call him Dr. Stephen Popick. How are you, sir?
It's not so bad. I'm doing great today. It's a beautiful Friday. A little bit chilly here in D.C.
Hey, you show up in a collared shirt, we're actually going to give you the nomenclature. You look halfway professional today, my friend.
To be fair, I have a work meeting after this, so I need to look professional.
Yeah, every now and then I'll be dressed up doing one of these, and somebody's like, "Why are you wearing a tie?" It's like, "Well, I had a TV hit right after that, so I had to like dress up or some stuff." I'm dressed up on Heard Tell, I got a media hit right after or right before or something like that. All right, brother. Hope you're having a good New Year. New Year, same problems. I want to start here. We talk every time you come on here. I talk about like the numbers and how this just spins our head and explain. I think we need to just start with some basic building blocks of how an economy actually works, because we hear bits and pieces of the news story and we don't put them all together. We know the financial success for a person in life has a very basic formula to it. Vaguely, there's some exceptions, but the rule is education, job, housing. That's the three-legged stool for financial success, give or take. Now, there's other factors, and there's stability and what kind of career and whatever. But those are the three things, right? Well, we have a weird labor market, and we have a housing crisis that we don't really want to talk about outside of, the nerdosphere that keeps bringing it up and trying to get it into the conversation.
Yep.
If we're going to have a healthy economy, at some point we need to talk about these basic building blocks things like housing, and not just the unemployment number, but employment that can get folks into the housing, which gives them equity, which is much more important than income equity, because that continues. This is the basic stuff of economics we don't spend a lot of time talking about, even among economists.
So here, let's break down one thing you didn't say that was important about housing, right? If there's jobs over here, people that are over here need to go somewhere and potentially live near where the jobs are. Now, there are the remote jobs these days, but let's talk about the vast majority of workers that are not working remotely or working from home, right? To that extent. Solving the housing problem means that we have better labor mobility to go to places where the jobs are. And without that, you don't have a well-functioning labor market. Right? Because the people that you want to have working in your city can't get to your city because your city doesn't have housing, or the housing is way too bloody expensive. And the truth is, this is not a national level solution. It's not a national level solution in the UK. It's not a national level solution in Japan. It's not a national level solution in the United States. There are things that the federal governments of those countries and others can do to nudge things into the right way, to allow for more building, to allow for more density options, etc. But these are fundamentally things that happen at the local level with our local politicians, the folks that actually do things that we never hear about. And it's these local level decisions that oftentimes are preventing the development of housing, or the types of housing that our cities and countries and counties need.
Yeah, and let's talk about the local part of that real quick. San Francisco legendarily has some of the strictest building codes in America. It's really hard to build something new in San Francisco, not just because it's extraordinarily expensive, but because
And
they're building
earthquake prone.
and the earth. And look, that's
Which
something
is granted, yeah.
that's something they don't talk about. You have to build something much differently there because of the earthquake stuff. If you build on the beach, you got to build at hurricane strength. That's part of it. But they have super strict
not all
building
of it, though,
codes.
yeah.
They have strict building codes. They have historical building codes where you have to fit into the neighborhoods, all this. It's really hard to build there. Then you go to like a suburb of Houston where there's almost no rules.
Yeah.
And you can build
also
almost
in
anything
San
you
Fran,
want.
most of the residential land in San Fran is zoned single family.
Right. So you can't build multifamily housing or
Can't even
apartments
build
or townhousing.
You can't even build a duplex that looks like a single family house.
Right.
And there's plenty of those.
Which are very popular in a lot of urban, ex-urban, suburban places now because you can just it's easy to manage and it's cost effective and it gives people things. The point is that's just one example. We have all these metropolises. We have all this suburban land, county, not like I live just past the county line. So I'm in the county, not the city. That's a huge difference in property tax, even though it's only about 1,000 yards in a straight line. These things are why this gets so complicated. Where do we talk about the local solutions, though? Because, look, we have a national and international audience here. They're all like, well, what do we do about it? Is it a legislative thing? Is it a zoning thing through your councils? Where do we even start with this stuff?
I think where you start is you have to be involved in whatever your local board or local committee that makes the zoning decisions for your jurisdiction, your area that you live in, to be actively involved in those. So those, like in my city of Alexandria, we have, a zoning board, and they will look at zoning changes or approve variances to zoning. And so it's part of what I do is I try to stay abreast of the developments, the applications that are there. It's all on a website. It's all easy to find. The meetings are every, third Wednesday of the month or whatever, and you look at that and literally I have a letter that I send to that planning board and to the city council on occasion to support initiatives that build the types of housing that we need that will allow more people of more varied income levels and more varied skills to live in our city, because I think that makes our city more vibrant.
Right. So, now you're a DC area. So let's just be blunt here. Another expensive area, but an area that needs a very young workforce. They need a lot of those recent college grads for a lot of reasons, not just the government jobs, but the support jobs. And you need a lot of labor. You need a lot of non-college education labor for all the supporting areas. That's where this problem gets bad, because now how do you have housing that's hard enough to build in the first place, but you got to get it affordable enough to have the workforce you need to support the city that you're building it in.
So your workforce
that in the right way.
So the workforce that you need, doesn't have to commute 2 hours to get into your city to work there. But it's a local level. And the thing is, with a lot of these issues, the voices of no can have a lot more power, right? Because it's the so-called detrimental effect, if there is one, right, is concentrated amongst a very small sliver of individuals that have a very big incentive to yell and scream. For the vast majority of the population in the jurisdiction, it would either have no benefit or slight marginal benefit, right? So folks don't take the time, because it's not worth it to them at an individual level, to let the city know, hey, we know it doesn't really do anything for us, but we know it does something for the folks that would be, serving us coffees in the morning as we go into work. So they don't write their letters. So the only thing that city council hits is a lot of angry people. So think about that. Like, it's like that's a classic problem of where the benefits are and where the costs are. So if the costs are isolated to just a few individuals and the benefits are spread out, even if the benefits are dramatically in the aggregate outweigh the costs, it's the people that are benefiting, don't participate, don't speak up, don't make those cases, right? And that's just our human nature.
Yeah.
So
it's joining us here. Let me not to interrupt you. Let me interrupt you and ask you this question though. With that, this is not a new problem.
No.
The wealthy, by and large, wealthy people own homes and own land. So you have the wealthier people are always going to want to protect their investment, understandably, in their land and their property. That includes property values. That includes what kind of neighborhood it is, all that sort of stuff. They're the haves. The people needing housing are the have-nots, but the housing is a problem. This is a very, very, very old problem.
It is. And we've made changes in this country to try to allow more people to have housing. I mean, let's keep in mind, go back 100 years, housing was, land, right, was the property of the very rich. You were middle class. You did not own your place that you lived. You do not own the land. We were one of the first countries, if maybe not the first, but definitely the first few, to push for this thing called the 30-year mortgage, right? Before that existed, you had to buy a house and have it all paid off within 5 to 10 years. Which was beyond the capacity for pretty much, the vast, vast, vast majority of American households. So now we get this 30-year mortgage backed by the government to some degree. That becomes an option. That does allow for homes to be more affordable to a larger swath of the population. That is why today you have probably about, I think it's around probably a 66, 67, 68% home ownership rate, right? So the median U.S. household owns their house, or at least has a mortgage on their house. This is in contrast to a lot of other countries that don't have the 30-year mortgage, and you can find those, and they still have sort of those more antiquated systems, and it's more traditional for people to rent. Now, those countries where it's more traditional for people to rent have other vehicles to allow people to build wealth, and their housing markets aren't completely as wackadoodle as ours.
How do we talk about this? Stephen Popotnick joining us, economist. How do we talk about this as the problem it is? Because we've talked about it before. The housing crisis is not of the last few years. It's not of the last administration or this administration. This has been going on for a while, but it's going to be a huge problem going forward. Here's the thing. We know this is right up your alley. This is what you do for a living. Housing is used for an indicator for a reason, because if you build a house, it's not just the house that the family's going to live in. It doesn't matter if it's an apartment or a townhome or a multifamily or single family home. It's the same formula. There's something like 26 trades go into building one house. There's all the materials that go in this. There's the economic, all those trades jobs everybody wants to keep getting more and more of. That's an indicator of whether those are doing well or not. Are we building houses? Because you got to have all those trades to build a house. So that's an indicator.
And all the things that you go to the department stores or Amazon to buy to fill up said house.
Right. So housing's such an indicator. Why do we have this cognitive disconnect of going, we have a housing issue. There's no way this isn't an economic issue going forward if you don't fix your housing issues as you go along. I know an economist can do that, but in the discourse, we can't seem to put those two things together.
We can't. Again, it is, you have folks who like the neighborhoods that they have, who like the places where they live, and they don't like to see them change, and that's human nature, and that's understandable. But when you don't want to see something change, as an example, we have a development here in Alexandria that was primarily for some of our lower income families, and the owners of that property wanted to expand it, make it a little bit taller, add 2 more stories to it, essentially. And the folks right around where that development was, it's a very nice development, pitched a fit, saying it would change their property values, it would alter their views, they'd be more shade, it would be not as good, right? And so it was you someone who's 2 miles away doesn't even know about that, but again, like that's I think that ultimately is the issue. The costs are borne, right, by a very small sliver of folks that have a very big incentive to be upset. And I don't even know if they're right to be upset, but they are upset. They have reasons for it. I understand those reasons. And then the benefits are spread more diffusely. That's all. This is a problem as old as government.
Prime Day es el 16 y 17 de julio. Con las ofertas épicas exclusivas para miembros Prime, recibe el reconocimiento que tanto mereces.
Wow, gracias. Ni siquiera preparé un discurso. Quisiera agradecer a mi familia, que siempre necesita cosas. También a Sam, mi repartidor, por entregarme todas mis ofertas increíbles tan rápido. ¡Te adoro, Sam! ¡Mua!
Compra ofertas en electrónicos, hogar y más este Prime Day, del 16 al 17 de julio.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Granger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Granger.com, or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Yeah, Stephen Popovich joining us. There's a couple hard and fast formulas in economics. Things like population growth for economic growth. You got to have a birth rate or you got to have an immigration. One or the other, or your economy shrinks. That's just a formula. Like, there's no getting around that.
Sort of technically.
All right, don't get your PhD out.
It's not technical, but generally speaking, yeah, population growth is economic growth.
Population growth is economic growth. We have things like the dollar goes up and down in value. That affects things. That's a formula.
Yep. That's true.
Do we have a basic formula that people can base off of with housing? Because things like unemployment and all that, but housing seems to be something that's just one thread that goes through just about everything when we start talking about economies. Is there a formula that we can talk about and kind of apply to some of this to get it down to my level that I can understand it from your level, the policymakers who studied this thing and understand it through and through?
That's a good question. So what I would say for someone like you, what I would focus on is a housing affordability measure. It's just a simple number, right? You know, what percentage of people could afford, you know, the set amount of house, right? How affordable is housing? And the National Association of Realtors has a number. National Association of Home Builders has a number. I'm certain there's a myriad number of government agencies that have a number too, right? But if I'm looking to understand how the housing market is working, I'm looking at housing affordability, right? So can people afford to buy a house? That's and of course that's affected by the size of houses, what goes into them, and also what the interest rates are, right? So we know, and how many houses there are that are being sold. Like, so we knew that a couple of years ago, right before COVID, we actually were having pretty decent housing affordability numbers. We still had a shortage of housing, but interest rates were so low that housing was more affordable to folks. That's good. We've seen a spike up in the lack of housing affordability, so to speak, in the last couple of years, thanks to continued declines in inventory being available. Obviously, house prices went up a lot and interest rates went up. And so that just means people are more locked in, right? So if I was focused on something, I would just look at, you know, a standard housing affordability metric and see how that's changing over time. And, you know, we could pick a measure to say, you know, we think that the housing market was well functioning back here at this date. So that's our benchmark. And we're watching us if we're above our benchmark or below our benchmark. That might be the easiest heuristic for someone to look at.
Yeah, Stephen Popovich, economist extraordinaire, talking how, okay, we've been talking about messaging, and economics is a hard thing to message. On a good day, it's still hard to message. However, I've been critical of this particular presidential administration, the Biden administration, because I don't think their messaging on the economy has been very good at all. It's been bad, in my opinion. It's not been cohesive whatsoever. The president has come out and said this, and I'm going to quote him here. He's talking about 3.5 trillion. This is a Reuters article. I'll link to it. 3.5 trillion in manufacturing technology over the next decade. We all know how investment over the next decade sound bites work out, but that's neither here nor there. Here's the quote. Quote, "This is not about getting to a level spot. This is about going to a whole new plateau. We're the only country in the world who's come out of the crisis stronger than we went in." What the hell's the president talking about?
So are you keying off the word plateau there?
Here's the thing. I understand on an economic graph that there's plateaus. The problem is, in a post-Jimmy Carter America, nobody in America wants to hear the word plateau and economy at the same time, even if it's in a non-negative sense. Is that fair to say?
We want to hear it's always sunrise in America again. to
Fair.
quote another president, right?
Fair, but this is a comms thing, not a math problem. Do you want to say plateau to an economy that is actually not that bad on paper, but does have some dark spots, but the perception is that it's a mess, and the messaging is what bridges those two things together?
No,
I'm not sure this is the way to go about this.
I wouldn't have called this a plateau. I would say that we're climbing back up the ladder again, right? That is what we're doing. And Biden is correct in the second part. Like, flip it. We're the only country in the world who's come out of the crisis stronger than we went in. We can argue that, but there are facts supporting that statement that we have come out of the COVID recession in a much better overall position than most countries that are most similar to us, right? And you can make the very coherent and cogent argument. There are some factors that work against that, but as I said, like you can make this argument and it's supportable. So I would have led personally with the second sentence and just left it at that. What he's talking about here is we just had an employment report drop literally this morning, about 2 hours ago, and it was a very good employment report. It didn't. We didn't unexpectedly miss expectations. We unexpectedly went beyond expectations and had a better job report than what we expect than what we might have been thinking about. We also positively saw that wage growth, which I know people want wage growth, but wage growth that's sort of been off of its own kilter, adding to inflationary pressures in the economy, we saw wage growth sort of coming back down. And the picture that you can paint from this is it looks, based on the last couple of months, that we might be getting back to a 3% inflation rate economy, one that's sort of normal, one with a normal, well-functioning labor market, getting back up to almost where we were from at the beginning of the COVID crisis. So like this is a very positive jobs report. Jobs were up in a lot of different industries, and I said wage growth was starting to come down a bit. So we're starting to see those inflationary pressures tamper out. Could this be the mythical soft landing that the Fed's been trying to engineer? It could be.
Now, you talk about the soft landing. We talked about this before. There's as much danger in coming off of inflation as there is in going up in inflation if it's not handled correctly, though, is there not?
So you're talking about disinflation or deflation, right? Yeah. Here's the problem with deflation. You want to keep saving there. You want to keep saving because, and so like that means there won't be as much investment potentially in the economy. So, yeah, there's always dangers, right? I mean, there's a reason why a lot of countries in the world, Andrew, have this inflation targeting approach for their central banks, and we don't have that in the U.S. We don't. Our central bank only has a dual mandate on inflation and employment, but there's not a typical inflation target, right? But sort of unspoken, there's a general agreement that inflation at about 2 to 3 percentage points is kind of the sweet spot. So you sort of want to get back to that, but keep in mind that what the Fed's doing, Andrew, is they're using a lever that takes a lot of time to get moving to pull it down or pull it up, and a lot of time to stop the motion. So they're trying to predict where we're going to be 6 months, 9 months from now, and where they're making their decisions. So that's the danger, right? If they misread the situation, they keep the lever moving up a little bit too long or moving down too long, then we overshoot or undershoot, and we don't hit what we want to be.
Prime Day es el 16 y 17 de julio. Con las ofertas épicas exclusivas para miembros Prime, recibe el reconocimiento que tanto mereces.
¡Wow! Gracias. Ni siquiera preparé un discurso. Quisiera agradecer a mi familia, que siempre necesita cosas. También a Sam, mi repartidor, por entregarme todas mis ofertas increíbles tan rápido. ¡Te adoro, Sam! ¡Mua!
Compra ofertas en electrónicos, hogar y más este Prime Day, del 16 al 17 de julio.
This is the story of the one. As head of maintenance at a concert hall, he knows the show must always go on. That's why he works behind the scenes, ensuring every light is working, the HVAC is humming, and his facility shines. With Granger's supplies and solutions for every challenge he faces, plus 24/7 customer support, his venue never misses a beat. Call quickgranger.com or just stop by. Granger, for the ones who get it done.
Popnik. Okay. The big question everybody's concerned on, same question as last year, New Year, same problems, right? You've heard this once or twice in your life as an economist.
SSDD.
Are we going to have a R word? Is there going to be a recession in 2023?
Okay, so I hate this word.
I know.
And I'm going to give my usual diatribe here.
I know.
We could have a recession with negative 0.1% GDP growth. We would not have a recession with 0.1% GDP growth. It's literally the same economy, right? So we shouldn't be keying. I get why we key on it. It's an easy metric, but I think, an economic slowdown has costs just like an economic recession has costs. There are different degrees of it, so we shouldn't think about it as like, if we avoid the recession, woo, play the trumpets. That's great. But if we avoid the recession by barely avoiding it, there's still issues. So could we have a recession? Yes, absolutely. Could it be mild? Yes, absolutely. We've had recessions in the past that I think the average American was not even aware we had a recession, right? I'm thinking of like 1998 or around that time. We had a mini recession. It was kind of a blip. I don't think most people are registered at the household level. But we could, certainly, have a deeper one, but I think that's relatively unlikely. Right now, the data are showing that if we're going to have a recession, it's going to be quick and mild. Of course, we're assuming that everything else right now holds, current trends hold, nothing else goes crazy, COVID 3.0 doesn't take off, Russia doesn't invade yet another country, all those other things that can happen in the world, an asteroid doesn't hit. Who knows?
There is one of those things, though, that is happening right now that has changed things. China is reopening. That is going to change things in the global economy and for the U.S. economy as China reopens from their COVID lockdown.
Yes. Yeah. So that is for the global economy, that's a positive thing, right? That means that, for example, maybe my component for my Sleep Number bed that's malfunctioning actually comes over on a ship.
This is a very first world problems there, Captain Privilege, but point noted.
I just, personal example of how the supply chain crises are still going on, are still affecting people. But yes, that would have a benefit that would help accelerate economic growth across the world with China reopening, because those goods would be more easily, flowing out of China, and their production would be occurring. So yeah. It's definitely better to have better for the economy to be reopening. Don't know if it's better for health. We'll see if they have to shut down again, because their COVID policies and their COVID vaccine do not seem to be particularly effective.
Yeah, just one of those great unknowns that make economics so interesting and sexy and fun, right? Stephen Popnik, our economist friend. I appreciate that. See, I want to do that when we talk to you, though. Like, talk about those basic building blocks. So when China's a big thing, but if we don't talk about those building blocks and we don't talk about the state of the economy, then you can't really talk about how China does or does not affect it. It all goes together, and that's why we keep having you on to explain this as we go along. Appreciate your time. Let folks know where they can follow you, what you have going on, and how they can keep up with you until the next economic headline that we have to get you to come in and explain it to us.
At some point, I'll start writing for Ordinary Times again. It's one of my New Year's resolutions. We'll see how long I keep it. Like most Americans, I'll probably fail at some point. Sorry, Andrew, in advance. I'm also, always, watching what's happening on Twitter. As long as Twitter still exists, you can find me at Motoeconomist on Twitter, where I do share from time to time takes on housing and sort of how the U.S. market is going.
Stephen Popnik, always appreciate your time, my friend. You explain this well so that even I can understand it, and you usually give me stuff to go look up and read on, which I will now go and do, so I try to keep up with you better next time. Thanks for the time, sir.
Happy to do it, man.
You too, sir.
Religion is at the intersection of our 21st century life, even if we don't express a faith. At a time when it seems that religion isn't as prevalent as it once was, it still leaves its mark everywhere. As a pastor, I know that religion isn't something I just do on a Sunday, but it's found in every nook and cranny of my life. Sexuality, politics, social media, the economy, war, nationalism, all have some kind of religious angle to them. And as a communicator, I want to find the stories that can help people understand this part of our society that is so important to so many. Hi, I'm Dennis Sanders, and I'm the host of Church and Main. Church and Main is a podcast about the journey of faith and where it intersects with modern life. I look at faith with a journalist's eye, asking the who, where, what, why, and how religion affects some of the major issues of the day. Join me as we journey together. You can listen to Church and Main podcast at the website churchandmain.org or on your favorite podcast app. I look forward to seeing you.
Folks, you've heard of Ethan Brown on the Heard Tell Show a couple of different times, but if you're interested in learning about how to discuss things like climate change without all the politics and doom and gloom, head over to his podcast, The Sweaty Penguin. Sweaty Penguin is a late-night comedy-style climate podcast working to add nuance, critical thinking, humor, and hope to the climate conversation. They got over 100 episodes already, breaking down weekly news stories and specific topics, from the vanilla to the ADHD to the international accountability to orangutans. Yes, I know, it's a comedy thing, so just go with it. But each time, exploring different ways we can make progress on these issues while still helping the economy, health, security, and everything else we care about. Feel overwhelmed, exhausted, or excluded by today's climate change discourse? This is the podcast for you. Find The Sweaty Penguin wherever you get your podcasts or at www.thesweatypenguin.com.